Right, we're now live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this first meeting of 2021. I wish you all a healthy new year. We can't say much more, but welcome to the meeting of the South Planning Committee. I am Councillor David Evans, Chair of this committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed, so members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. Should any committee member experience technical difficulties during the meeting, please contact the designated number that you have already been supplied. Everyone is requested to mute their microphone unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate your desire to speak, but nothing else, so that it's clear who is asking to speak and the debate has to be heard by those listening in public. Members are asked to ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item you have heard unless you've heard the debate. As chairman, I will interpret the council's existing standing orders in the light of the requirements of remote participation, with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making the ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosure of pecuniary interest. I ask everyone that speaks during the meeting to include members of the public and officers to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so those listening know who is speaking. Roll call and disclosure of pecuniary interest. Members are reminded to disclose a pecuniary interest in any matter to be discussed which is not included on the register of interest, and leave the meeting by turning off their camera and muting the microphone prior to the being discussed. Chairman to read out the members of the names and ask them to confirm their presence and confirm their interest. David Evans, Chair of this committee. I have an interest in item number 7. I will make a statement and then I will leave the meeting. Councillor David Turner.
Yes, Councillor David Turner, representing Much Wenlock, Vice Chairman of this meeting. I have an interest in item number 6, where I'm the local member, and I will make a statement and then leave the meeting. And also, in regard to item number 7, it isn't a pecuniary interest, but the site does sit within the area of outstanding natural beauty, and I'm a member of the partnership and the management board, but have taken no part in any comment on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Boddington.
Andy Boddington, Ludlow North. No pecuniary or other interests in this meeting.
Councillor Simon Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Simon Harris, ward member for Broseley. I have no interest at all.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Higdet.
Councillor Nick Hignett, representing Ray Valley Ward. No pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Huffer. Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corvedale Division. I am, like Councillor Turner, a member of the AONB Partnership and Strategy and Performance Boards, but I have played no part in application number
7. Councillor Tony Parsons.
Other than that, no interests. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons.
Councillor Tony Parsons, representing Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton. I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Matt Shinton.
Councillor Matt Shinton, Clibbern Waterford Division. I have no pecuniary interests.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Tyndall.
Represent Brown-Clee Division. I've got no pecuniary or other interests other than for item 7. I too am a membership of the AONB partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tina Woodward, please.
Present. Councillor Tina Woodward, Alvelin Claverley Division. No interest to declare.
Please, would officers now confirm their presence? Planning officers, please.
Yes, Co-Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner.
Andrew Shirakovsky, Consultant Planner.
Thank you. Solicitor.
Thank you, Chair. Kim Brown, Solicitor.
And are there any other officers present, please? Gemma.
Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways.
Right, I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. Apologies for absence, please.
We have no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting held on November the 20th. I move the minutes of the previous Southern Planning Committee meeting on the 17th of November as circulated with the agenda papers to be signed with me as a correct record. Please can I have a seconder, please?
I'm happy to second that, Chair David Turner.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. That is now seconded. All those in favour, say aye.
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 Public questions, please.
We have no public questions, Chair.
Thank you. As Chairman, I'm David Evans. I'm turning to substantive items, inviting the planning officer to present them before dealing with the public speakers part of the meeting and being asked to comment from members of the committee. Right, we start with item 5, which is former council offices at Westgate, Bridgnorth. Richard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. This application was first considered by committee at the October 2020 meeting, at which it was deferred for further discussions with the developers over the layout, scale and density of the development. The officer report sets out at paragraph 1.2 the various changes done. I think the best approach would be to lead you through the slides to refresh your memories of the original scheme, and so comparison could be made to the revisions that we now have. Okay, next slide, please. Right. Again, this is the site context, shows the former Bridgnorth District Council office buildings in their situation in the west part of Bridgnorth. Features to note, particularly to the north of the building, the Wenlock Road is essentially the sort of the tree-lined sort of green entrance to the west of the town. This is along that particular corridor, and again, as pertinent to the date later, to the southeast of the site, we can see the Ludlow Road and the residential properties that are on the opposite side of the road at that point. Just to give the context again, the building to the top left and sort of northwest of the site there, that is the police station building within the town. Next slide, please. Again, this just shows a shot of the site as it currently is and the existing building on it. All those buildings would be removed as part of this development proposal. Next slide, please. This was the layout as originally considered in October in terms of the arrangement, showing the sort of T-shaped plan for the housing within the main body of the site, and to the right-hand side, the housing that would front onto the Ludlow Road. We move to the next drawing, please. This is just to give the context. If we can just move to the next one, please, it will assist us. This is the revised layout that's now before us, and the main points to highlight are in the centre of the development, close to the sort of the T-junction within development, there is now a sort of a formal garden piece of open space created within the development. That is resulting in the loss of one property from the site layout and a reorientation of the other properties in the immediate vicinity. There's also a small area of open space connected with it at the actual head of the T-junction, just in front of the properties there. That is the sort of a layout change in the middle of development. The road dwellings immediately to the right of that open space area. Again, there's been a change in house types, which has actually freed up some space between the buildings, again, to try and create a greater feel of spaciousness within the centre of the development. To the right-hand side of the screen, we can see the properties that face Ludlow Road. Those are now being pushed further back into the site, allowing for a sort of tandem parking arrangement. And adjacent to that, the various sort of front garden areas is proposed to use a grasscrete type material to give some informal manoeuvring space for vehicles as well as needed. But the key reason for that changes is it actually has reduced the previous almost continuous drop curve that was going to be along the road, and also has made a greater separation distance from the houses because we're on the opposite side of the road at that point. Those essentially are the changes that have been made to the actual layout. The actual house designs and types were not an issue raised by the committee in October, and those do remain as before. If I carry on running through the slides, we'll show you again what those are and just give some context views. This is an imaging that's been prepared by the architects to show the road into the site, indicating the sort of palette of materials proposed in terms of the block paving for the roadway, a shared surface arrangement, and the various material combinations intended for the dwellings. If we can move to the next view, please. This is an image of the newly created sort of central sort of green square area within the development. The road on the right hand side view pass, if you look down that road, that is sort of down towards the Wenlock Road and the entrance to the site. This is the sort of T-junction area within the site, and the main body of the open space is the area we can see there, and where sort of the view is taken from the smaller addition to that area of open space that's at the head of that T-junction. The view below is an impression of the development from the Ludlow Road, showing the layout with the tandem parking and the introduction of some tree planting and the green areas again to break up that particular sort of avoid sort of car domination of that frontage. It also shows an indication of the house types proposed along there. We can see it's been referenced in the correspondence to a accommodation 3-story design, and we can see that in the centre view there, it's the buildings at which have accommodation within their roofs lit by dormers. Next view, please. Just running through this again shows that the trees that would be removed as part of the development to enable it to go as proposed. Next view, please.
Good God.
In terms of the new planting, this is an indication of the areas it shows in terms of the actual central area there, the additional trees there, which is in terms of the combinations going in there, for instance, the Warren Beam is the larger specimens that are there, but the general mix of new planting through the development includes hornbeam, beech, lime, field maplewood, cherry, mountain ash, amongst others. As you can see at the top of the image there, there's some additional tree planting to supplement the retained trees on the green element that actually fronts onto Wenlock Road and forms part of that corridor approach known as Tansley Bank into the town. Next view, please. This again is just a breakdown of, in a sense, the unbuilt development within the site. The top left view is really the area of open space that we would normally be taken into account in developments. But there's also the indications there of the actual extent of the shared surfacing road in the bottom left, the garden areas, top right, and the vehicle hard standings in the bottom right view. Next view, please. Again, this is another indication of landscaping plan, not sort of detailed up with the precise species, but an indication of the elements of hard surfacing and greenery within the development. Next view, please. Again, some site levels drawings. The Ludlow Road development, because of the nature of the site, that is a slightly lower level than the Balkans, and as members recall, there is currently a retaining wall along that Ludlow Road frontage. Next view, please. And this will be just to run through here. This is just generally an indication of the various house designs. So Tim, if you could just click through these, I'd appreciate it. Indication there are, say, chimney features on some units, combination of materials and be it cladding and brickwork that is proposed to give a sort of kind of variety of mixes of materials within development. You just carry on through. As I say, they do have a contemporary feel design of the houses, but it's not one that officers considers it inappropriate in this location. Right now, here if we just, again, in terms of the actual photograph of the site, this is currently the Ludlow Road frontage. This is looking southwest out of the town, and this is the area where there would be the properties provided with direct access onto the road. Next view, please. Again, this is another view of that same Ludlow Road frontage down towards the actual main road junction where it joins with the Wenlock Road. Next view, please. It's shot as again, the houses are on the opposite side of Ludlow Road at this particular point. It shows a variety of styles of dwellings along that side of the road. Next shot, please. Again, that's another view looking essentially southeastwards from that particular Ludlow Road frontage. Next view, please. This is the junction of the Ludlow Road going off to the left and the Wenlock Road that goes to the right. Building in front of is not part of the application, that will be remaining. And the trees that we see to the right hand side of that shot, those will be retained in the development. The impact on those to the left, it would be a situation there would be a number of those would have to be removed to accommodate the Ludlow frontage development. But the immediate corner of the front of the site would stay green, as it were. Next shot, please. This again is the Southsea Bank, showing the large tree we can see there that will be retained in the development. It just shows how the former council office site does contribute to that green corridor effect we can see by looking up the road at that point. Next shot, please. Again, this is the view from Southsea Bank looking towards the town. The site in question that we are looking at is on the right-hand side. The immediate greenery you see sort of in front of the lamppost here, that is sort of surrounding the police station, that's undisturbed. And then the area that we see with the tree, the retaining wall and the grassed area, that's all elements that were retained and not changed in the proposed development. Next view, please. Again, just another closer shot at the entrance, again showing situation there and the trees that would be kept as part of this scheme. Next view, please. Again, further shot, this is the entrance into this main vehicle access into the site. It's approximately where I'd be in the location I'm standing here, and this again is the view into the town, but again shows the greenery as it were on the opposite side of the road at that point. Next shot, please. Again, another further view from the existing Wenlock Road entrance across. Again, it is a sort of edging in trees that mask rear garden boundaries on the opposite side of Wenlock Road. Next shot, please. And then just within the site, as the members recall, this is the view within the site towards the police station. And we have the next shot. This again is just buildings that adjoin the orientation right. It's sort of this, the sort of the west side of the site, the mixture of bungalows and houses in terms of developments off the wheatlands and Huntsman's Close. And that may be the last one. Just check. Sorry, okay. This is the view then. This is the existing property that adjoins the site on the Ludlow Road frontage, and this, which is just the sort of south of the intended row, and this is the back view of that particular dwelling. And that's the presentation. In terms of the adjustments made, obviously the officer view is that they have achieved an enhancement to the scheme, albeit only one unit lost compared to what was originally proposed. But at 30 dwellings and with the site being approximately 1 hectare, that is essentially the almost like this, the standard density that is looked for to achieve an efficient use of land in development by government, indeed, in when calculating housing land supply figures. So it does introduce that sense of spaciousness. It's still acknowledged that the amount of open space within the development is less than we would normally target in our policies, but in terms of this context of site that's there, the what is retained, the numbers provided relative to the massive building coming down, and the site's proximity to the other recreational facilities in the town, particularly the Crown Meadow and the other more formal sports facilities. In the report, it stated that those are some 300 metres from the site. I see that that has been questioned by the Town Council in their comments, but I can assure members that that measurement was taken from applying a scale to a rule to a scale plan, and in terms of the distance between this site through to the access to the area where the tennis clubs are, etc., 300 to 400 metres is a fair statement of its proximity to this site. So officers' view is that in terms of a manner in which this site could be redeveloped for housing purposes, take into account the constraints and the opportunities that is offered, that this is an appropriate scheme for development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. David, Chairman, any public speakers on this matter will have submitted a written statement to be read out in accordance with the revised procedure for public speaking. The local member may read their own or may elect the solicitor to read it. Can the solicitor read out any statements, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first statement is from the Bridgnorth Town Council, who writes, Bridgnorth Town Council reiterates its objections to the resubmitted proposal and asks the committee to refuse this application. The revised proposal contains one less house, achieved by increasing the size of some of the others, so that the number of bedrooms in the development is one greater than the previous proposal. Amendments to the Ludlow Road frontage have been proposed. However, having explained our concern about the previous proposals to the developers, we are disappointed that substantial issues remain. The changes to the layout on Ludlow Road frontage are minimal, with no meaningful resolution to a potentially dangerous situation, vehicles manoeuvring whether forwards or backwards onto a very busy junction. We are aware that Shropshire councillors have requested a speed assessment of traffic coming from the bypass island to the crossing on the Ludlow Road, due to the speed of traffic becoming a great concern to residents. This is without the impact of this additional development. The Grasscrete driveways include planting and trees which would inhibit movement in these areas, not improve them. In paragraph 2.2 of the committee report, the officer states the site has established vehicular and pedestrian accesses with an entrance on Wenlock Road and an exit on Ludlow Road. These are expected to be retained as part of any future residential scheme. This has not been demonstrated within the plans. We remain concerned about the lack of formalised parking arrangements for vehicles visiting the development. The access road is presented as being shared space between vehicles and pedestrians. We feel that the potential presence of parked vehicles in such a space compromises that potential shared use. It would likely result in vehicles parking along Wenlock Road or Ludlow Road or other nearby residential areas. In particular, nearby Conduit Lane already suffers from congestion at school opening and closing times, as it is heavily used by parents taking their children to school at Castlefields Primary School and Albury Wells School. The amount of open space on the site falls short of the standards set out in SAMDEV policy MD2, which seeks to provide functional recreational space for play, recreation, formal or informal uses, including semi-natural open space of at least 30 square metres per person in developments of this size. We note that the requirement for 30 square metres per person has been retained in draft policy DP15 of the recently published pre-submission draft of Shropshire's local plan to 2038. The development, as proposed, comprises family accommodation for an average of 3.4 bedrooms per dwelling. Whilst there are play areas, sports pitches and a skate park at Crown Meadow, the walking distance from the site would be around 600 metres, not 300 metres as stated in the committee report, and involves crossing the busy Westgate and Victoria Road. Overall, we feel that to make a development of this site acceptable would be to rethink the site layout, rather than tweak a design which began as a compromise dictated by viability constraints. Next, I've got a statement from Councillors Elliot Lynch and Les Winwood as local members. We are pleased at the percentage of houses that will be designated as affordable. We are also pleased to see the range of different sized properties which will cater to a diverse demographic. With the renewed proposal, we are also supportive of the moving of the entrance away from the busy junction. Whilst we are disappointed with the loss of mature trees, we are satisfied with the level of new planting which will happen to allow the site to be developed. It is our view that approval should be subject to the developer working with the arborist to ensure that the correct species are planted. Following on, we would also request that if it is to be moved, that the tree planted by the late Elizabeth Yeomans on the green in front of the offices in dedication to the end of Bridge North District Council be saved and replanted elsewhere on site. We welcome the green space that will be provided to the north, which will provide a green frontage to the site. We therefore agree to the officer recommendations that permissions be granted. Next, Chair, I've got Ian Gilbert, agent on behalf of Housing Plus Group. Thank you, Chair and members. This application has been made on behalf of Housing Plus Group, which is a charitable community benefit society, providing 18,000 quality affordable homes and care services across Shropshire and Staffordshire. As one of the largest affordable housing providers in the area and a major investor in communities. Following your committee meeting, we have worked in conjunction with the planning officers to redesign the scheme and have incorporated changes suggested by them. We thank your planning officers for their help and are pleased to see that this application is recommended for approval today. Despite viability being critical, we have reduced the site by one dwelling and introduced additional public open space in the central area of the site, which will include seating and planting surveyed by the adjacent residential properties. The open space sits adjacent to a re-envisaged road design with a raised junction, which will also comprise a change in material and the introduction of street furniture and planting. The revised scheme delivers significant changes to how the scheme will look and how it will be enjoyed by residents within a central courtyard area, which is very different to the public open space at the front of the site. You have been sent CGI images to demonstrate this new look and feel of the site. We met with Bridge North Town Council to discuss the frontage of the scheme onto Ludlow Road and highway safety. The proposed dwellings, which must face Ludlow Road to be compatible with the council's design policies, have been redesigned to allow a greener, more open frontage, as well as additional parking and manoeuvring space for vehicles. This will help residents access and exit their homes in a forward direction, as with other existing properties on Ludlow Road. As a not-for-profit registered provider, we have been able to focus on the design quality of the site before profit, and we feel the scheme is of the highest quality. We thank members' acknowledgement at the previous meeting that the viability of the previous scheme was a key consideration, and stress that the loss of a further dwelling and additional costs of urban realm improvements have further challenged the viability of the scheme. Considering the site's constraints, we believe this is the best scheme design we can achieve, and we respectfully hope that members will support the application. That's it for the public speaker statements, Chair.
Thank you very much. Chair David Evans. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in response, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. I think it's nothing further to add to what was said in my initial presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. David Evans, Chair. I will now ask members of the committee for their comments. Please indicate on the chat function if you wish to speak. The solicitor will then let me know who is to speak next. So I now invite the members of the committee to speak, please.
Okay, I've had an indication from Councillor Turner who'd like to speak, Chair.
Councillor Turley, please.
Thank you, Chair. David Turner, Much Wenlock. I've got one concern, well, I've got a number of concerns, but one which I just want to mention at this point, and that is the parking arrangements for those 7 properties, I think it is, that are front onto Ludlow Road. It's been at least 9 months, possibly 12 months since I've been to Bridge North, but I did see from the very useful slides that there is double yellow lines across part of the frontage. I think probably going up to the Ludlow Road entrance of the Westgate site. tandem parking does mean that if you want to get the car out that's closest to the house, you've got to move the car out that's closest to the road. And I'm just a bit concerned about the potential conflict between those manoeuvres and moving traffic, and also the potential, therefore, for cars to be parked on double yellow lines, because it's easier to do that than it is to shuffle the vehicles. And I think this was something which was borne out by the town council. And I'm just wondering whether it's something which either Richard or Gemma Lawley could respond to in due course. I don't need an answer now, but I'd like it to be considered in the round of the consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. The next speaker.
Next, we've got Councillor Shinton, Chair.
Councillor Shinton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My question has a similarity to Councillor Turner's. How are we treating the junction on that corner there? As someone who accessed Bridgnorth District Council offices for many years, that I came down there, I had to turn left up to up the Wenlock Road and then access in there, and I came out onto the Ludlow Road. Now that junction was busy then. I use Bridgnorth if I've got to use Bridgnorth. If I've got to go shopping, I use Bridgnorth. So I always access Bridgnorth along that road. Are we not having traffic lights or anything on that junction? If you look at the proximity of all the other surrounding houses, we've got a police station immediately adjacent to us. Granted, it's like the Mary Celeste now, but you know, presumably somebody does go there from time to time. But I'm more interested in the island going up Wenlock Road to the left, and the island as you go into town, coming up Squirrel Bank. That's always a wonderful oh God, which way do I go syndrome there. So Gemma, are we doing any traffic lights or something like that at that T-junction?
Slow down to that, please, Gemma.
Apologies, I had to put myself off mute. Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways team. So just to respond directly to Councillor Shinton's query regarding the junction, correct that it is a busy junction, and the Ludlow Road and Wenlock Road are the main routes into Bridgnorth town centre. I think that's acknowledged. I think what I draw committee's sort of attention to is the existing use of the site in comparison to the proposed use, and the number of vehicles that are likely to be generated by this development compared to the existing office use. But I would say that also the applicant has submitted a transport statement, and in support of that, they have done some junction analysis work to give an indication of the number of vehicles and the other existing using that junction, and then with the proposed use as well. And those surveys were done in January 2020, so pre-COVID. So as you can imagine, at the moment, it's very difficult to get traffic data. The third thing I was just going to acknowledge is that as part of the local plan review, Shropshire Council are undertaking a couple of pieces of work with regard to how traffic moves around the Bridgnorth area, and then so that will be looked at through the local plan. But then also, in addition to that, there is a town centre study that's been done that's looking at the pedestrian cycle access within the Bridgnorth centre. So issues with regard to kind of like the Ludlow junction that you've raised, Councillor Shinton, will be looked at as part of that assessment as well. Would you like me just to respond, Chair, to Councillor Turner's query while I'm speaking? In regard to Councillor Turner's query regarding the TRO and the parking on Ludlow Road, we have requested that a contribution would be made of within the region of £3,000 to look at a traffic regulation order, so we can monitor that situation and implement appropriate measures as required. So I don't know if there's any queries with regard to what I've just raised.
Thank you, Gemma. Would you like to come back, Madge?
Just quickly, I hear what Gemma says, and yes, there's all these surveys and data collection, etc., etc. But what I would have really liked to have not raised problems, but to perhaps have made problems no worse than they are now, or even improve on them now with a site like this. So I'm quite disappointed that this doesn't seem to be something of a major problem there, because as I've come into Bridgnorth regularly, which is where I shop, that junction has got increasingly busy, and you've got to be pretty nippy, I'll tell you, to come out of there and go into town. Now, if Bridgnorth wants to encourage people like me who live 11, 12 miles away to use their shopping facilities, let's look at the economy, then they need to do something at that junction to give some comfort, in inverted commas, to people like me. Thank you.
Thanks, Madge. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Simon Harris would like to speak, please.
Harris, please.
Thank you very much for letting me speak, Chair. Looking at the photographs and their computer-generated visions of the site, it does look really nice, I've got to say. Modern housing will be blessed with modern techniques, and the mix between the whole diversification of the properties is to me looks great, and I have no doubt that the people of Bridgnorth will be queuing up to move on to this particular area. The issue I've got is again, with the same as everybody else with Ludlow Road, with people, the cars reversing out onto Ludlow Road. The photographs that Mr. Fortune showed us clearly shows the blind corner as you come down the hill, which I'm bemused why he would show the committee that photograph. Bearing in mind he's trying to persuade us to give this the go-ahead, and he instantly shoots himself in the foot by showing us a photograph of the blind corner that is clearly not shown on the amended proposed site ground plan that we're looking at the moment. I think in a way that it's too little changes to the application from what we saw last time. It's not enough. Ludlow Road is definitely not accommodating for what is required, and I'm of a mind to vote to refuse this application. It's too little of a change. Sorry. Okay.
Councillor Harris. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Boddington would like to speak, Chair.
Councillor Andy Boddington, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned, I mean, I take on the points and I'm concerned about the access to Ludlow Road. I won't repeat that. I'm also concerned about the layout of this development. The housing looks wonderful. I mean, the actual design of the housing I think is great. No problem whatsoever. But we have, 7 houses or more that face outwards onto London Road and are not part of the community. We don't, on a small site like this, having houses that all look towards each other, towards common areas, towards a common green, where children can play, is what we really need. And this really is a sort of drive-in, drive-out development with a small little patch now of open space in the middle. The other open space isn't particularly usable by the public because it's on a very steep slope. And I honestly think this is not an exemplary design. This is a site, this is a prominent location. It is not an exemplar. I think something different could be done with it, with houses of this design, because I think they are great. But I can't find myself being willing to vote for this.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Hignett.
Councillor Hignett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Hignett. I had 2 concerns about this application, and including the figures that I looked at from the last meeting that we had on it. I was very concerned about the high density, and I understand that the density of the buildings is to make the site viable from the developer's point of view, but I still think it does look quite a dense development. But I understand that, so I would be willing to go along with that. But I have a question for our highways officer. A lot of the comments so far, and mine included, seem to be about the highways access. Bearing in mind there's now exit from this development onto Ludlow Road. On 6.5.1, it mentions that from a highways point of view, development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if these would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or where the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. I'm not convinced. And then it goes on to talk about parking in the next paragraph. It doesn't actually deal with whether they feel that the cumulative effects would be severe. I'm not convinced that the cumulative effects aren't going to be really serious, bearing in mind the fact that the Ludlow Road, Wenlock Road is a busy junction already, and I think the entrance is still too close to the junction. I'd be happier if the entrance to that site was moved as far as possible towards the police station site, so that there was more room between that and the junction. I don't know this area personally. I've not been to visit the site, obviously. Wouldn't be allowed. But I'm just still concerned about the highways aspect. I just wonder if our highways officer Gemma has anything further to add on the effects of the increase of traffic on the highways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we get Gemma to come back in there, please, now?
Yeah, so in response to the concerns by Councillor Hignett, so Gemma Lawley, Developing Highways, apologies. So yeah, in terms of the test, we would look at whether the impact of the development is likely to be severe. In this particular case, I think what the considerations would be is the existing use of the site. However, I think the concerns with regard to Ludlow Road are acknowledged in terms of the complexity of the junction and also the vehicle approach speeds as well. We don't have current data that I can share with committee today. However, you know, historic surveys do indicate that vehicle approach speeds do exceed the posted speed limit, and obviously there are a lot of movements around. So in terms of the cumulative impact of the development, we would look at the existing use and the proposed use of the site, but we'd also consider the whether satisfactory access has been provided. On this occasion, we've looked at you know, all aspects of the development and reached the conclusion that based on the number of properties that are accessed off Ludlow Road, then a highway objection couldn't be sustained in this particular case.
Thank you, Gemma. Richard Fortune, like to come back in, please. Richard.
Thanks, Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Yeah, just in response to some comments made by Councillor Harris and Councillor Bonington on this one. Yeah, regarding the photos presented, well, I'll present the facts. They're photographs taken of the setting of the site, so they are not there to convey or force an argument one way or the other. It's just to give the members a clear indication of the context, how the site is currently accessed, and what the current boundary features are to the site, which essentially where there are not the access points, we are dealing with retaining walls of various heights. With regard to the issue of the manoeuvring of vehicles on Ludlow Road and the tandem parking arrangements, that is an area which the applicants have sought to address by indicating that they are intending to use a grasscrete type material for the remaining parts of the front garden areas to those units, to create a situation where there is the ability for them to informally to do manoeuvring within their site boundaries, plot boundaries, at the front of those properties, which again would be an option there for addressing the concern that members have raised about one car being moved off the site for another one to be to then be taken off. With regard to the fact that the development essentially has two elements, a front-facing element to Ludlow Road and the remainder being sort of inward facing to the new cul-de-sac road. That I would indicate that is really a function of the levels here. The retaining wall areas element does mean that the green space on the Wenlock Road frontage is effectively a level area. But it does mean that where we already have an existing retaining wall feature along Ludlow Road, there will be townscape implications by essentially, if you ended up with properties actually backing onto that, in terms of very high enclosures of private rear garden spaces onto the road, which could in itself not detract from the street scene in terms of having retaining wall and potentially another 2-metre fence on top of that. So there is a case there in officers felt for creating an active frontage there, rather than one that would be a less attractive feature in the street scene. This is one part of Ludlow Road where there is frontage development, that being witnessed by what's on the other side, whereas as further you go out of the town, it very much that's a combination of grass banks and the service roads. So in terms of just delivering something that has got to look, in the officer view, have a pleasant appeal both within the site and in terms of its aspects visually out towards Wenlock Road and Ludlow Road, that is why officers can understand why the developers have chosen this particular approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Motley.
Cecilia, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cecilia Motley, Corvedale Division. I think this is a very tricky one, to be honest with you. First of all, the site is a difficult site because of the sharp slope, and one has to take that into consideration at all times. I, like others, am not happy with the tandem parking approach to Ludlow Road, because whilst I hear what Richard says about grass-creating it so that there is more ability to manoeuvre, I still think manoeuvring in itself could prove to be something of a nightmare, which inevitably means that residents are going to cut corners and one of them will back out into the road rather than having to undergo a lot of sort of manoeuvres in order to get out. That would be my fear at any rate. With regard to the highways issues in general, we all used to use Westgate. Those of us who were around when Westgate was used for our planning meetings, and I think all of us were very much aware of the fact that both the Wenlock Road and the Ludlow Road are becoming, if anything, increasingly busy. It's an important site, this, because it is really one of the gateways into Bridgnorth. I quite accept that, but I can't see that this development can properly go ahead unless much more stringent arrangements are made for traffic control. And so I do agree. I think it was Madge who said right at the beginning, either we need to have traffic lights down at the bottom there, or better, we have to have a roundabout treatment, which I think at least would ease the situation. Yes, it might cause congestion coming up Ludlow Road in particular, but at the same time there's bound to be congestion coming up Ludlow Road anyway with the present arrangements, because of the difficulties of getting out of Ludlow Road and going into Bridgnorth. So I do think that's a very serious issue. With regard to the green space element, I think there's a real conundrum here, because the developers have tried to address this by sacrificing a plot. The problem about the plot is that it's rather hard to know who's going to use it. It's not really going to be easily accessible to the people facing onto Ludlow Road. And is it actually going to be worth giving up a whole unit for, when obviously margins are tight on this kind of development? It is tricky. I'm afraid that my overall conclusion on this is that it's not right yet. We haven't got it right yet. And I will have great difficulty in supporting it for the second time around, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Celia. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Parsons, Chair.
Tony Parsons, please. Councillor Parsons.
Councillor Tony Parsons. Yeah, this is a very tricky one to call, and you can see that in respect of what the local representatives make of this particular application. We've got the town council objecting to it and the two unitary councillors supporting it. So it's a very fine margin. And when we looked at this in October, there were a number of issues with regard to overdevelopment that we considered at that time. Some of those issues, I think, have been addressed. I think that the house, that part of the development from the Wenlock Road, the T road with the housing around that, and the additional open space, I think that would now be, in my view, an acceptable development. My concern, like many others, are the houses that face onto the Ludlow Road. I have parallel parking at my house, but I'm only reversing out into a cul-de-sac. This is reversing out onto a busy main road, and it looked from the photos that there's even parking on the opposite side of the Ludlow Road in front of the houses that are already there, and so that will make that reversing in and out of these particular houses very tricky. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I think that is the area which makes me reluctant to support the application. The rest of it, I think, is okay.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Woodward, Chair.
Councillor Tina Woodward, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Woodward, thank you for allowing me to speak. I've listened to the debate, and I think the developer has gone some way of reassuring me with actually the removal of one of the one house type, basically, and put a little bit more greenery in. But I do actually think that the tandem parking on this particular road, to me, is something that needs to be resolved before I could give it support, and that's my position. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Woodward. Anybody else want to speak, please? Tim Ward, did you want to speak?
No. No further indication, Chair.
Right. As the planning officer or the solicitor got anything to clarify, please? Richard, do you want to clarify any points?
Richard Forge, Principal Planner. No, nothing to further to add to, and I'll be hearing the members' discussion.
Okay, Kim, solicitor, do you wish to confirm any points or add anything?
Nothing further, Chair, no.
Okay, if there's no more speakers, please can I have a proposer and a seconder for the application, please? A proposal, please, from
I'm going to propose refusal, Chair.
And do we know what
Chair, I second that.
Okay, do we have a reason for refusal, please?
The fact that the highways still isn't right, the fact that there is concern over the parking arrangements onto Ludlow Road, and the fact that we feel that the site still doesn't act as a coherent whole, which we feel is important.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Do you have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah.
Who's the seconder,
I'll
please?
second that.
Is that Councillor Harris, is it?
It is, yes.
Okay. Right, we have a proposal and a seconder for refusal of the application on the grounds, as Councillor Motley has said, traffic, parking and other issues on the site. Is that acceptable? Can you come back there, Mr. Fortune?
Sorry, Chair, it's Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. In terms of the message that members have about the issue of the tandem parking and the accessing onto Ludlow Road, that is quite very clearly expressed by them as to what the unacceptable elements of that is that they consider. So I can know that is a reason I can put together. In terms of the statement that it's not a coherent whole, I think that is something where we need to have some explanation by reason by what characteristics that is the case. In terms of the, what we can look to explain that come an appeal situation. So that is where I would really seek some further guidance from the members on, because the debate has indicated there is, I understand, an acceptance of the architectural design of the individual properties, and it is the layout that is the concern. They clearly explain the highway issues with the layout on Ludlow Road, yeah, but I would leave some further guidance on what the other aspects of the layout is that is deemed to be unacceptable.
Okay. Do you want to come back to the councillor, please? Councillor Motley?
Chair, I think Andy Boddington wanted to speak. Am I right, Andy? Sorry.
Yes, correct, and thank you, Andy Boddington. The point about the coherence of the project and its design as a whole, which is layout, not buildings, is that we have several properties that look away from the development, so it doesn't form a coherent community. And ordinarily in a site like this, you'd have properties that gaze at each other, gaze at the common safe space in the middle. And that's the sort of thing I think we need to see here.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Motley, do you want to come back there now with the?
Well, I think Andy, I was slightly groping for what Andy has said. I do think that it's important that this development, which in some aspects is a good development, should actually have the feeling that it is one development and not small blocks of housing which bear no relationship with each other. And I think that's what we're missing with this, because of the way that the houses face onto the Ludlow Road. I just feel that the very linear treatment of this estate actually does not add to the attraction of it. It would, even if one could make the estate, make it look more random but more coherent by including the houses facing inwards at each other rather than with our backs to each other, as the Ludlow Road houses are. I think it would create a much softer look. The design of the houses, I'm not arguing about at all. I think they look attractive, but just think this is an opportunity to create a really stunning development. And I think the fact that these houses are separated out in the way that they are, and the fact that they are so extremely linear, really doesn't assist that at all. And for a site like this, which is a prime site in Bridgnorth, I think we need the highest standards of design development, and I don't think that's what we have here.
Okay, you've got that, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understand the point. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so on those grounds, the Councillor Motley has proposed and seconded by Councillor Harris. Could I now put it to the vote for refusal, please? And if you will vote accordingly, the solicitor will read out the names of the committee. As they're entitled to vote. So.
Okay, thank you, Chair. At this point, can I just confirm that only those members that were present for the whole of the item can vote? So run through the names now. We've got a proposal and a seconder to refuse the application against the officer's recommendation. So if you could please indicate whether you vote for or against that proposal. Councillor Evans?
Against.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
I understand Councillor Huffer wasn't present at the start of that item, so won't be able to vote on this item.
Can I just confirm that?
Yes, thank you.
I did hear all the debate, but I was on two different laptops at the time, so I don't think it'll make any difference. I will abstain on this item.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Huffer. Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
I'll abstain.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
Abstain.
And Councillor Woodward? Councillor Woodward?
Abstain.
Okay, so I've got 6 votes for the proposal, 1 against and 3 who've abstained.
Right, so that's carried now as the application is refused by the proposal from Councillor Motley and seconded by Councillor Harris. Thank you. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is 13 St Mary's Lane, Much Wenlock. Please could I have the officer to read the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Richard Ford. This application before us is for a reuse of an existing commercial building at the Raven Hotel in Much Wenlock. It relates to a building that has had consent for use as additional hotel bedroom accommodation and has subsequently been divided up for use by 6 separate businesses. If I could perhaps have the first slide, please. Seem to be going backwards, I'm afraid. Right, thank you. Yeah, this location plan, it indicated in the red is the extent of the building in question, and the blue outlined land shows that the land in the same ownership. The building that was fronting onto St Mary's Lane is actually accessed from the hotel car park, which is the sort of darker greener shading to the right, to the east of that building. Then next slide, please. Again, this is slightly sort of closer in view, again indicating the building in question and its relationship with the Raven Hotel and also neighbouring properties to the south and to the north. As most can see, it is at the end of a row of 3 linked properties. Plan also shows the obviously juxtaposition with the public car park opposite St Mary's Lane. Next view, please. This is a sort of sketch indication of the layout of the accommodation to show how it has been divided into the units. On the ground floor, as you see there, essentially are 3 at both each level. The ground floor is slightly larger than the upper floor because there's a single story element. Next slide, please. This is a plan that's been supplied by the applicant. It shows the car park area associated with the hotel and numbered spaces, which an indication of the capacity of the car park. And the row that we can see labelled 1 to 8, which is the sort of the northern batch of red markings. That's there. It's been indicated that those spaces will be available for users of this particular building, which as the number of property is showing just on the western side of the site there, and the access through is close to where we have that indication of a car drawing there, but that is the access point through. Next one, please. This has been provided. It shows that there are some rights of way across the car park which are unaffected by this particular building and proposal. Next slide, please. This is a view of the building from St Mary's Lane. It shows us the north elevation is the lighter stone elevation, and we can see a number of windows that are tight on the property boundary, with an access way through to the rear of another property that's off Barrow Street. And we can also then see the view of the actual elevation that faces towards St Mary's Lane, which does not have any doorway entrance. Next view, please. This is a view from the building from the sort of the rear east, directly in front of us, where you can see the doorway with the side light and the small first floor window. That is the rear of the element that's parallel with St Mary's Lane. And then the acute view we got here, the elevation, that is the elevation facing south. And this shows closest to us the single story element, which is Unit 6 in the scheme. And that is a building that clearly, historically, it's probably originated as a dwelling at some point, but as I say, is now sort of currently in use in connection with the hotel. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the view essentially if you're standing at the building looking out into the car park area with the Raven Hotel. Essentially turning left will be the route down towards Barrow Street and the entrance into the site. And this just gives an indication of the extent of that parking area that there is already there at the hotel. Next slide, please. This is another view of part of the south elevation of the building, which essentially looks out onto that car park area, but also across the rear of the properties along St Mary's Lane. Next one, please. And then this is again another view that shows us the elevation that is essentially the single story element we see here. That's the sort of the east elevation facing down towards Barrow Street. South elevation is the one that's essentially looking left in that direction. We can see on the extreme left of that picture that a lower roof element that is the neighbouring property which adjoins the part of the building that actually runs parallel and immediately adjacent to St Mary's Lane. Thank you, and I think that was the extent of those images. So the situation, yeah, the building in question, as the report sets out, explains how it became adapted to business uses, and there are currently 2 tenants in the building. The report sets out the situation whereby the reasons the application was made and the context for supporting the business as to why this reuse has been carried out on the building. There's been particular concerns raised primarily in terms of impact on neighbour amenity and on parking and highway safety. The opposite view is that this is a situation where it's a long-established building, it's a non-designated heritage asset, clearly one of that is contributes to the patch of the Much Wenlock conservation area, and it's important to see it retained in uses that can maintain it in good order. Having considered the comments raised by member parties on this one, officers feel that an acceptable balance in terms of business interests, safeguarding the future of the building and protecting residential amenity can be achieved by the recommended conditions which are set out in the report on the page 73 in terms of the nature of the uses. The proposal is in terms of the business use is now an activity which the government has recently changed use classes order and has created new Class E, which is much more wide-ranging than the previous use classes. The opposite view is that provided that is essentially narrowed down to the details specified in the report in terms of excluding some activities, this would achieve an acceptable balance with residential amenity considerations, and also additionally with the proposed hours restrictions, which is set out in condition 3, that this also would be a way of balancing business requirements with neighbour amenity. On that basis, there's also a condition also in terms of where we have those windows that are shown directly onto the northern boundary, where they were not, right on built on the boundary. There's a scope for those to be pictures of obscure glazed, and that has been confirmed by the applicant as being achievable. So in terms of neighbour amenity, it is a situation where we acknowledge there will be an outlook from the first floor of the south elevation across the rear of properties to the south of the property, but that remains so essentially since the building was constructed, and clearly remains so with the current use as authorised use as hotel bedrooms. With the proposal to limit it to the business use specified and the restriction of essentially no use after 6 at night on Mondays to Saturdays and no use on Sundays and bank holidays. That officers feel would be potentially a net gain in terms of the neighbour amenity concerns based compared to how the building could actually be used at present. With regard to the traffic generation, again, with the nature of the size of the units in the rooms in question, the availability of the car park area that is there, officers feel that it would be very difficult to sustain a highway safety refusal reason or a parking refusal reason for resisting this alternative business use for the building. It is something which officers feel is fully in accordance with the aspirations on the Much Wenlock neighbourhood plan in terms of the reuse of buildings, the supporting of local businesses, and essentially with the conditions recommended, it is one where officers are suggesting that an approval is appropriate in this case.
Thank you, Richard. Can the solicitor now read any public statements for public speaking, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, we've got local resident Philip Green, who says, "My name is Philip Green and I live at September Cottage in St Mary's Lane, Much Wenlock. My wife and I are next door neighbours to number 13. I have read the appraisal, recommendations and conditions of use in the planning officer's report, and I wish to speak at the meeting on Tuesday, January the 19th. I would like to refer to Appendix 1 of the report, i.e. conditions. In item 1, the report recommends that windows in the north elevation shall be glazed with frosted glass and made non-opening, as the report makes clear, to preserve the amenity and privacy of adjoining properties. Our property is on the southern elevation directly overlooked by 2 large sash windows, but no such mitigation is suggested here. The prospect of 5 companies being installed next door, the loss of privacy, and the ability to simply enjoy our garden are of the greatest concern to us. In item 2, it spells out the type of commercial enterprises that could make use of the forge, e.g. financial and professional services and aesthetic clinic. It, however, also includes retail, which I take to mean for the display or retail sale of goods, other than hot food, principally to visiting members of the public. If I have the right definition of retail in this context, then rather than restricting its use, i.e. as the report says, to safeguard the amenities of nearby residential properties, it does the exact opposite. I remain opposed to this planning application." Also, I've got a statement from Much Wenlock Town Council, who say, "Much Wenlock Town Councillors have agreed to resubmit their previous comments regarding the application for 13 St Mary's Lane, with additional points from their discussion of the application. Much Wenlock Town Councillors object to the application as councillors consider that this is an inappropriate location from which to operate businesses. There are concerns about noise nuisance and the impact on a residential area. There appears to be no reference to working hours noted in the application." Next, Chair, we've got Councillor David Turner, local member, who'd like to read his own statement.
Okay, Councillor Turner, please. Councillor Turner.
Right, okay. Thank you, Chair. David Turner, member for Much Wenlock. This application has caused much concern with local neighbours and with the Town Council, which has objected to it. I recognise that we need to assist business as much as we can, especially at this challenging time. So it's been good to see 3 recent commercial and retail lettings in the town, the last one at the beginning of December. Whilst the conditions that have been attached to the officer recommendation go some way towards regulating issues which have been the cause of concern, there are outstanding matters. The use of the premises remains a concern in as much as retail covers a very wide range of activities, some of them quite discreet and low traffic, and others that can be quite intrusive, either in terms of noise or odour. Probably just worth mentioning that the most recent letting in Much Wenlock has been to a wind instrument retailer, and they certainly won't be very quiet. The current occupants of the premises and the suggested activities are of little concern, but as drafted, there is the opportunity for future trade which would impact on the amenity of immediate neighbours. The officer report at 4.25 makes reference to the proximity of residential properties to a pub car park and suggests that its use did not deter neighbours from purchasing their houses in this much sought after residential area of the town. It is worth noting that the Raven Hotel has always set itself apart from the other licensed premises in the town as a fine dining establishment, and until recently has actively discouraged potential patrons from seeking only a drink. As a restaurant, it has at times attracted loyal clientele. I recognise a change of management in tragic circumstances and the COVID pandemic have necessitated a change in terms of marketing positioning, but this should have regard to neighbours' amenity. There appears to be a contradiction about the hotel having only 25% occupancy before a series of lockdowns struck, and the suggestion that the letting rooms would have 12 occupants coming and going at all hours. As regards car parking, paragraph 6.4.6 of the officer report refers to dedicated space for this proposed development in spaces 1 to 8. These spaces have tended in the recent past to be used by visitors to the Raven Marketplace, which fronts Barrow Street and which sells vegetables, fish, bread, and of necessity recently, ready meals to take away. It would be difficult to regulate the use of the spaces without lining and marking the spaces, something which would be nigh on impossible given the existing rough gravel surface, as you'll have seen in the PowerPoint presentation. As regards access, it is acknowledged that Barrow Street is not heavily trafficked, but the close proximity of the buildings, that's the marketplace and the hotel, to the highway mean that the access and egress between parked vehicles is a manoeuvre that requires a good deal of care in order to avoid both pedestrians and passing vehicles. I note that condition 1 refers to non-opening and obscured glazing of windows on the north elevation, but there's no reference to those on the south, which look directly into the Garden of September cottage, as Phil Green mentioned in his statement. On the basis of the concerns I've expressed, I would ask that the committee give consideration to the suitability of these premises for the intended proposed use, particularly the retail aspects. If the committee is minded to approve the application, I would urge that further consideration is given to the concerns about potential trades within the use classes overlooking to the south and to the car parking arrangements. Thank you, Chair. I will now turn off my microphone and the camera.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. David Evans, Chair. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points?
Excuse me, Chair. I've also got the Suzanne Campbell for the applicant, who's got a statement.
Yeah.
I shall read that out if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so Suzanne Campbell, applicant, who says the history between the Raven Hotel, a former coaching inn, and the Forge dates back to the 17th century and is one of the clearest examples of business premises working together in this area and supporting each other. This application only seeks to continue that extremely well-established relationship. It would be the Raven's intention to obscure all first floor windows of the Forge for the privacy of the businesses who occupy the units. It was always the Raven's intention to provide a location for small local businesses to operate which complement the services we currently offer at the hotel. These businesses would operate within acceptable and considerate daytime hours and would not create either the noise or odour nuisance. The changes would reduce the times at which people were coming and going from the Forge. 6 double hotel rooms could easily mean 12 individuals coming and going at their own convenience over a 24-hour period, whereas the services suggested would be operational for perhaps 8 hours of that at an absolute maximum. There are also services that take time, so a few appointments each day would be likely, and not an endless stream of customers coming and going as a convenience store, for example, might draw. The Raven would be open to restricting the operational hours. The current occupants of the premises and their suggested activities are of little concern. That's in speech marks, as the Raven do not intend to change the type of business operating within the premises and fully understand the neighbours' concerns and are willing to agree certain restrictions with Shropshire Council to avoid any nuisance. We do not see that the activities would be of larger concern moving forward. Speech marks again. The Raven Hotel has always set itself apart from other licensed premises in Much Wenlock as a fine dining establishment that discourages potential patrons from seeking a drink. The Raven intends to retain that reputation and in fact build on it. As such, we wish to offer a more comprehensive package to our guests, which we would like to include discreet beauty treatments, such as that offered by the Aesthetics and Beauty Clinic. We do not anticipate this will complicate our licensing terms at all, as the plans for the Forge are totally unrelated to alcohol consumption on or off the premises. The Raven would welcome the opportunity to mark out parking spaces. It would clarify the current parking arrangements between the Raven and its neighbours. The access to Barrow Street requires basic driving skills and common courtesy. It seems clear that a few Wenlock residents have become accustomed to the Raven working at half-mast, and any indication that it might fully utilise all its facilities to thrive might upset the apple cart. I ask these residents to consider the alternative. If we don't allow businesses to work together, support each other and diversify, will we have any small businesses and hospitality venues left at the end of this pandemic? Okay, that's all speakers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Richard Fortune, do you need to come back here with any concerns or clarification of any points, please?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. I just think it'd be appropriate for me to just clarify the terms of the restrictions on the use classes condition that's recommended. Just so the members are aware, as drafted, it means that the element of the building, if we look at the photograph that's on the screen here, we can see in sort of the far distance the section that actually is directly fronting onto St Mary's Lane. Those two elements are what forms the aesthetics clinic, and that in planning terms is a generous use, i.e. it doesn't fall within the use class. So any alternative uses of that building would require another application for planning permission. The retail element that will be allowed by that condition is restricted solely to the ground floor of the wing that we can see projecting towards us. And the condition says that the first floor element of this element should be used only for uses that fall within financial and professional services and office activity. The actual uses that are being excluded from use on the building, which normally would now be covered by Class E, includes restaurant use, sport and recreational and fitness centres, medical or health facilities, creches, day nurses and day centres, research and development, and industrial processes that you could carry out in a residential area without causing harm to amenity. So officers have to sort of thought carefully about the nature of the use and the range of activities that could be compatible with it, or would be compatible with the adjacent juxtaposition of residential properties. So it means that as drafted, either alternative uses would need to come to the council for decision for a plan application, or they are sufficiently constrained to be activities that should not cause any undue disturbance to adjacent properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. David Evans, Chair. I now ask members of the committee for their comments, please, and could you speak to indicating, and the solicitor will ask who wishes to speak first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Shinton would like to speak, please.
Councillor Shinton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Shinton, Clibberry Mortimer Division. In principle, I've got nothing against this application at all. The only bit that exercised me was when I looked at Appendix 1 and the conditions and the Class E brackets A retail. Now, that's far too wide an area. I've just heard what Richard said about those that have been excluded, but that word retail is so wide. And that would be the bit that would worry me. But otherwise, I have no problem with voting for this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shinton. Next speaker, please.
Okay, Councillor Hignett, please.
Councillor Nick Hignett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Nick Hignett. Businesses need to evolve and they need to change. I know that planners need to ensure that any new business usage of this is complementary to the current usage of the building and adjoining buildings. I understand the concerns of the residents, but I think the planning officers seem to have looked very carefully at how they can try and maintain the privacy and the if there is the right to have a nice, peaceful, quiet back garden. As a businessman myself, it's much better to see business premises kept in business use rather than changed to residential housing. It is very rare, if ever, that you see residential houses being turned to business use, but you very often, and particularly in my area, I've personal experience of many business premises being turned to residential housing because they can't seem to think of any other way to keep businesses going. And I think in the pandemic that we're hopefully coming towards the latter stages of, and the way that the businesses have struggled, particularly retail, over the past 12 months or so. I welcome this and I will be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
No further indications, Chair.
Does the planning officer wish to add any comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. Just again, just in terms of the aspects of the retail, it is acknowledged that the retail activity is can encompass a number of sort of businesses, but that is the whole purpose of the use house order, to give some flexibility. I think I just reiterated the point that it is solely the ground floor element of this rear wing that is proposed to be one where retail could take place, and the scale and nature of that accommodation is going to be in itself a limiting factor. Right. So I just the officer would suggest that in a sense, because of the nature of the building, that in itself should not lead to any unacceptable amenity conflicts.
Thank you, Richard. Does the solicitor wish to add anything, please?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay. If there are no more speakers, please, could I have a proposer and a seconder for this application, please?
I'll propose the application with that clarification that the planning officer has just given me vis-a-vis the size of the building will restrict the usage. I'll propose it, Chairman. Councillor Madge-Shinington, Clibberry Division.
Councillor Madge-Shinington, thank you.
Councillor Nick Hignett, I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, we have a proposer and a seconder. I'd now like to put it to the vote to accept the application as the officer recommendation, please. Could the solicitor go for the vote, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I can just remind members again that only those present for the whole of the item can vote. We've had a proposal and a seconder to go with the officer recommendation to grant permission subject to conditions set out in Appendix 1. So if you could please indicate whether you're for or against the proposal. Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Huffer?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
Against.
Okay.
That's 9 votes for and 1 against, Chair.
Okay, with 9 votes for the application and 1 against, that application is carried according to the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Now, item number 7 is Rosie Orderly. As chair, David Evans, as I indicated, I am one of the local members of the next item, and we will hand over the chair to the vice chair, who will not participate in the next item. The same as my statement, where I will read the statement. So I'd like to hand you over now to the vice chairman, David Turner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Go to item 7, Rosedene, Hordley, Craven Arms. Change of use of agricultural land to site for 5 camping pods, roadway with parking area and septic tank installation. Could the planning officer please present this item?
Thank you, Chair. It's Andrew Shirakowski, Consultant Planner. As you've just read out, Chair, it's an application for a change of use of agricultural land for the siting of 5 camping pods, a roadway, parking area and a septic tank. If we go through the slides first, if members aren't familiar with this location, it's quite a I won't say an obscure location, but it's a little bit out of the way. It's Hordley, if you're not familiar with it, is on the it's to the north of the Craven Arms to Bishop's Castle Road, I suppose is the best way to describe it. If you're familiar with that area, there's the road that cuts back up to Marsh Brook, which is the road that this development is off a mile or 2 up that road. So it's a slightly tucked away. As you go up that road towards Marsh Brook, there's an area of woodland, and then this site sits to the northwest. So the woodland where the main road goes through is in the southeast corner of that map. Essentially, what you've got here is a field within what was an agricultural holding, as set out in the report of, let me see, it's around about 90 odd hectares, if I can find the figures. Yeah, it was 94 hectares. You'll see what's happened from the report, that there's been some change in the personal circumstances in the applicant in this case. And in fact, the size of the holding has been reduced by 40 acres from the original 94 that were sold off, and then that's left 54 which is then subsequently leased out, leaving the original farm buildings in a relatively small area retained by the applicant. Essentially, what they're trying to do now is find an alternative economic use for the land. It does mean, in this particular case, that the agricultural business has essentially ceased. So the intention here is to bring on 5 camping pods into the field. As you've got marked on this plan, there would be a new access road that would is shown at the top left-hand corner of the more detailed plan that you can see there, and then 5 camping pods located along the northeast boundary of the site in a line. There's been some amendment to the layout here. Originally, the parking area was located further south. You can see along that northwest boundary, there's 2 or 3 large trees there. And the parking area was originally located essentially under the root zone of the more southerly, if you like, of the trees along that line, and then the camping pods themselves were moved up towards the corner, so that one of them was essentially in the root zone of the tree at the very top of the site. You'll see from the comments of the tree officer that there was essentially sort of further discussion in terms of the impact on the trees with the applicant, and that resulted in an amendment to the layout that you now see in front of you, which has been an attempt to take the development away from the trees, to not have the impact on the trees, and that's set out in the report. The camping pods themselves are fairly simple timber structures, as you can see there. I think the dimensions are set out in the report as being, if I can find the right page, 7 metres by 3.2 metres. And they'd be located in a row as shown there, and then there's the drainage, which is also shown on that plan. And if we can move on to the next slide. There's a series of photographs here that just give you an idea of the site. So the site is on the left-hand side of the photograph here. And if we just scroll through the slides, it'll give you a flavour of it. You can see it's a fairly open field which has got hedges. Those are the trees that are along that northwest boundary that I just pointed out. So the road would go in essentially along adjacent to the hedge that you can see there, and then the camping pods would be located along the line of the hedge in the distance that you can see running across to the right side.
Sorry, I've lost the picture. I do beg your pardon. I've lost your slides.
Have you? Should we give you a moment, Councillor Tyndall, just to see if they come back?
I'm clicking on something which says Tim Ward with a tree in front of it.
You should have a box. Is there a box there with a red line around it, which should have it on if that's not on your screen?
Don't worry about me. You carry on.
Shall I continue, Chair? So
yes, thank you.
So the access road would run in essentially parallel with the hedge that you can see there from the left-hand side, and the camping pods are up at the top end of the field. If we move on to the next slide. That's the view again along the head. That's the view from the very top of the site, as you saw on the original plan. So where the access road would come in from the right hand side here, and then the camping pods are located along the line of, yes, that's correct, going down into the field from where we are. So if you can imagine that first plan, we're standing in that very top corner looking down the length of the boundary. You can see the original farm buildings there in the distance, which on the plan I showed you at the beginning were essentially at the bottom of the field. That gives you an idea of the woodland. This is the access road coming down from the main road through the area of woodland between the main road and where the farm itself is. In fact, you can just about see the junction with the main road. It's probably not very visible on your screen, but it is there. And then if we move to the next slide, I think it takes you the view in the opposite way. This is coming up the access lane. There's the house on the left-hand side is a separate property, and then I think if we go on to the next slide, you're effectively moving up the lane and you come to the farm buildings, and then our field is beyond these buildings on the right hand side of the road, and then eventually we come up to the corner where the point of access would be. I think that's the last slide. So that's the photographs hopefully give you an idea of the site. It has a degree of sensitivity as set out in the report. It's located in the AONB. It's quite an open site in some respects, in that the boundaries of it are delineated by hedges. It does have some trees around it, but it's nevertheless a relatively open site. You'll see in the report that it's recommended for refusal. This is one of these applications, we get these fairly frequently, where we've got applications for holiday accommodation of one sort or another, where we always get caught between that sort of tension on the one hand, where you want to encourage, tourism and development and employment uses, and invariably in the rural locations they want to be located in the places that are in many ways the most sensitive. So we have this tension on the one hand between encouraging development, encouraging the diversification of businesses on the one hand, and on the other hand, obviously not allowing these things to happen in a fairly haphazard way, in a way where they almost begin to have an adverse impact on the very environment that attracts people there in the first place. So they're difficult to deal with. As set out in this report, there are personal circumstances of the applicant here which aren't detailed in the report, which have led to the application being submitted. Essentially, you've got two reasons for refusal which really bear out the nub of the issues here for you to consider. One is that in terms of policy related to the development of this type of accommodation, you've got the raft of policies that are set out there in the reasons for refusal, which include core strategy policy CS5 on the countryside, CS13 on economic development, and CS16 on tourism, culture and leisure, where essentially what policy is looking to do is to try and locate these things in sustainable locations. So we put them in place, I think we're trying to encourage them in places where they're well related to existing villages and centres, where there's services that are easily accessible on the one hand, or alternatively they're linked to an existing business, and that's the way policy is phrased. But the key bits of policy are really set out in CS5, which includes three essential criteria, and that's the need to demonstrate need and benefit. As set out in the report, there's a very rudimentary statement submitted by the applicant in this case that they're secondly located in a recognised name settlement. Clearly that's something that the officers feel we couldn't recommend in this instance, because it is in an isolated rural location, and thirdly that it's related to an existing development or business. That the circumstances here is that the existing business was the farm, but that is no longer operational, so there is no existing business here to link this to, hence the officer recommendation, particularly in relation to the first reason for refusal. The second reason for refusal is essentially linked to the location of the site, not only in the open countryside, but more to the point in this case, to its location in the AONB. And in determining applications in the AONB, we've got the statutory obligation under Section 85 of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, which is the bit that's about it's worded requiring the council to have regard to the purposes of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the area of outstanding natural beauty, and that's actually repeated in paragraph 172 of the AONB. So essentially the second reason for refusal here is linked to that impact of this development on the AONB, and the officer view here is that it's too conspicuous a location, it would have an adverse impact on the AONB. So those essentially are set out in the two reasons for refusal, Chair. Those are the issues for you to discuss and to think over. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very helpful. Kim, would you please read out any public speaking statements? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a statement from Councillor David Evans and Councillor Lee Chapman, local members, And Councillor Evans would like to read out this statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Evans. You're on mute, David. Is David Evans there? I can't see David Evans, so unless he pops up very shortly, Kim, I think it'd probably be more appropriate move the meeting forward if you read the statement.
Yeah, Chair, he appears to have frozen on my screen.
Yeah, he's listed on the attendees still on the screen, so I have a feeling he's having difficulty.
I think you better press on, Kim, if you don't mind.
Okay, if I'll read it on Councillor Evans' behalf then. The statement reads as follows. Both Councillor Lee Chapman and I have looked long and hard at this application. Mr. Ashley has put this forward because he needs to supplement his income. Although he has a horse livery, he still needs extra income. At the moment, he's having to travel to Ludlow, some 35 miles away for employment. He would like to build these pods because South Shropshire depends on tourism. There is another place at the Station Inn in Marshbrook built on a larger scale. There could be spin-off from that. Also, Mr. Ashley would like to let visitors to his site have the use of his horses. This site is in the AONB, but is well screened. It is also a quiet, secluded spot. I'm sure with conditions put in place by officers, this could be made to work and help with Mr. Ashley's income. I will leave the committee to take the decision. That's it, thank you.
No further statements, Kim?
No, there's no further statements on that one, Chair.
Okay. Does the planning officer wish to clarify any points in response?
No, not at this point, Chair.
Fine. In that case, we'll go on to the committee. In that case, then, and I can see that Richard Huffer and Cecilia Motley both wish to speak. Can we start off with Councillor Richard Huffer, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question for officers. And Andrew's touched on it, and clearly there's been a change of circumstances which he felt unable to elaborate on. It's regards change of land use, and when there's change of land use and a farm diversification, become one. Clearly, this has been part of an established agricultural unit. There are going to be many changes in agriculture coming forward, and a lot of diversification projects which will hopefully keep farm businesses going. So the question is what's the balance between change of land use and something that can be seen as farm diversification that may fit a lot better within policy? Yeah. So over to Andrew.
Well, Andrew, can you just hold on a second, because Cecilia Motley has also got a question. Maybe you can deal with the two questions together. Councillor Motley.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Andrew, I note that the applicant also runs a livery business. And I'm just wondering whether there is any tie-in. I must say that I haven't really managed to pick it up, because I have to say this is a somewhat minimalist application, frankly. Doesn't give an awful lot of detail, but it does strike me that there could well be a correlation between having a livery business and actually wanting to put up accommodation to accommodate people so that they can stay on site with their horses, because this is happening increasingly in the very rural areas. And I'm slightly puzzled as to why there doesn't seem to be a tie-in. I just wondered whether you were aware of any tie-in regarding the livery being supported by these pods, because for me that would have made a rather more viable application in the first place.
Over to you on both of those questions, please, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, to take Councillor Huffer's point first about diversification, it's a slightly different issue in the specific circumstances of this application, because what's happened here essentially the agricultural use has ceased. Part of the holding, a quite substantial part of the holding, has been sold off, and essentially the remainder of it, I think, I'm not sure how much has been retained, but I think it's a very small part, and I believe it may just be this field has simply been retained for non-agricultural purposes. So in this particular case, essentially the agricultural use has ceased, and therefore it's quite right in this particular case that it's really no longer an issue of agricultural diversification, because there is no retained agricultural business. Clearly, if the original holding had been maintained, or even part of it had been maintained in agriculture, then I think Councillor Huffer, raises a very relevant and pertinent point, and clearly there, in those circumstances, there is an issue of whether what's proposed here forms part of the agricultural diversification of the landholding. But in the specific circumstances of this application, that is no longer the case. To come on to Councillor Motley's point, she raises a valid question, and in fact officers have tried to raise this point as is set out in the report, in terms of what that livery use was, precisely to identify whether or not there is the potential there for a link. And I think Councillor Motley is right. We've actually had a number of these applications where we've had proposals for developing holiday accommodation in relation to horse-related activities, and certainly there's definitely a market for those. I believe the planning officer in this case did raise this very point with the applicant, but unfortunately we've really not had any detail back that provides any evidence of what that link is with the livery use. So frustrating though it may seem, I'm afraid we simply haven't had that answer, an answer to that question from the applicant, even though it has been raised, as I understand it.
Thank you, Andrew. Now throw it open to the committee for consideration. Do we have any speakers?
No one else has indicated they wish to speak, Chair.
No. Okay. If there are no speakers, maybe we could have a proposal from somebody.
Councillor Mountain, Clibberry Mortimer Division. I propose to go with the officer recommendation, which is refuse on the grounds of the appendix and the reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Shinton. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second.
Is that Councillor Tyndall, is it?
Yes, I second it because it is in the application is contrary to policy CS16.
Okay, fine. On the basis that there are no further speakers, and I can't see any, anything you want to say, Andrew or Kim, before we go to a vote?
No, nothing further from me, Chair.
Nothing to add, Chair.
In that case, then we have a proposer and a seconder to go with the officer recommendation to approve the application. Kim, can you run the voting, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, only those members present for the whole of the item can vote. So we have a proposer and a seconder to accept the officer's recommendation to refuse the application as set out for the reasons in the report. So if you could just indicate whether you are voting for or against that proposal, please. So that's the proposal to refuse the application. Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Huffer?
For.
Councillor Motley?
Abstain.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
For.
So that's 9 votes for and 1 abstention, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that is the committee supports the officer recommendation, and we now move on to agenda item 8, and I'm hoping that David Evans is able to, here he is, he's able to come back in again now.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, very much for doing that. We now on to item 8, which is Sunninghill, Summerhouse Lane, Longdon, Shrewsbury, and I ask the officer to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Shurakowski, Consultant Planner again. Yeah, this is an application for the erection of a single-storey rear extension following demolition of the existing extension that's on this particular dwelling, and the erection of a two-storey side extension, which includes a double garage on an existing dwelling at Sunning Hill, Summerhouse Lane, Longdon, Shrewsbury.
Longdon, not yours, is it, any?
Longdon, sorry. Yes, Longdon. The application, as I set out in the report, is reported to committee because it's a council member of staff who's making the application. If we run through the plans first, the house that's here is a 20th century house. It's a two-storey house. You'll see from the plans here, and in fact you'll probably get a better appreciation of it when you see the photographs. It's a fairly sizable house. Let's try and explain this, which is a little bit tricky. You can see that on the drawing at the top, the plan, the house faces to the top left-hand corner of the plot, which is northwest, and then you'll see there's an extension to the rear of that. I don't know where, Tim, you can pick that up with the cursor. Yep, that area there, that's the extension of the back of the house that's going to be demolished. And then if you move down to the lower drawing, you can see it's fairly apparent there where there's a fairly sizable extension on the western end of the house. And then if Tim takes the cursor back to the rear of the house, there's going to that white outline is the additional extension on the back. So essentially that extension will replace the one that's shown on the plan above. So you've got two main elements to the development. It is a fairly substantial house. You can see it looks like it's probably been developed in phases. If we go on to the next the following plans and photographs, yeah. So these are the plans of what's proposed now. You'll have seen in the report that there were initially 3 representations that were submitted by neighbours. Following those representations, there was an amended plan submitted, which varied what was originally proposed. The original proposal included the extension that you see here on the western end of the house. It did include 3 dormer windows on the front-facing elevation and also a window on the end elevation adjoining the property to the west. But as a result of, I think partly the representations and concerns about the impact that particular window on the western elevation would have in relation to the adjoining property, that the plans were amended, and the number of dormers is now reduced. So you'll see on the elevation that's at the top right hand corner of the screen that there's only 1 window there towards the right hand, and that's it. Yeah, there were originally 3, and you can see the garage that's underneath. And if just to the right of that, you can see the gable end where there's no longer any window, and the boundary with the property to the west is essentially to the right of that gable end, as we'll see on the drawing shortly. If we come down to the third drawing down of the elevations, if you can bring your cursor up to that, Tim, you can see. It's quite difficult to actually understand on this plan, but essentially you've got the rear elevation with the flat roofed extension. If you bring the cursor up to your right a bit, Tim, you can see the large windows in the back there. That's essentially the flat roofed extension. You'll see there's reference in the reports to the windows above those being enlarged and having Juliet balconies put into them. Because that extension would be flat roofed, there's then the issue of whether or not that flat roof could ultimately be used as a balcony. And you'll see one of the recommendations in the report is that potential use is restricted to maintain the privacy of the adjoining properties. If we move on to the following slides, I think they just show the photographs, which will just give you an idea. So that's the existing house. So the main extension will go on the right hand side of that photograph, and the boundary of the adjoining property to the west is just off the edge of that photograph, or it's a little bit off the edge of the photograph. You'll have seen from the original plans it's a fairly sizable plot, so it's not a small plot, so it's not hard up against the boundary of the immediately adjacent property. The idea is once the extension is built, it's actually got a brick finish at the moment, but it's to re-render the building. I think the idea is to pull the whole thing together in terms of design. That's the existing extension on the back. That would be demolished, and you get a new flat roofed extension put on there in its place, which would extend across the building, and then the two windows on the first floor would be extended to form Juliet balconies. That just gives you a little bit more of the contextual setting. So there's a driveway, and again, that photograph shows you that it is quite a big plot, and the house to the west is off to sort of in the distance between the house and the large tree you see on the right hand side. That house is a 2-story house. Just a point in the report, there's a slight error in the report at paragraph 2.3 where it makes reference to the bungalow. It says that the C20 bungalow, the 20th century bungalow to the west, it's actually to the east, and that which is behind the view as we see on this photograph, and then there's a 2-story building to the west on the other side of the site. Basically, as a result, as an upshot of the amendments that have been made, there was reconsultation has been done. You'll see the recommendation is that because the consultation period doesn't actually expire until the end of the day, it's that if you're minded to approve the application today, it's obviously approved subject to any further comments potentially being made by the end of the day, but we haven't had anything further. We have had a submission from Councillor Roger Evans, which if you're happy to, Chair, I shall just read whilst I'm going through. So yeah, from Councillor Roger Evans, he says, I support this revised application with the appropriate updated plans which take into consideration the previous observations made by local residents. I also note that this was discussed at the Parish Council meeting held yesterday, Tuesday the 18th of January. At this meeting, concern was expressed over what may take place in the future. Taking this into consideration, they ask that all buildings on this site should have a condition imposed which would ensure that all parts should be associated with and considered as being part of the main dwelling. I'll comment further on that in a minute. I'm not sure if that's the last slide. If Tim, we can just slide on, move on to the next. I think that's the end. I know it's one. Is that the last one? That's the last one. Yeah. So that's basically the application, Chair. The issues that there were with this application appear to have been resolved. I'll just make one comment in relation to that. That the email from Councillor Evans, where there's the request that an additional condition be put on. We're not recommending that in this case because essentially it relates to an issue about the potential future use. And you've got to deal with the application that's in front of you today. It's an extension to a dwelling house. There's no use proposed at this stage, so we wouldn't recommend the inclusion of that condition. Albeit, you know, the concern is understandable. But if the house was to develop a further extended or alternative use, then potentially that would have to come back as a new planning application. And that's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, David Evans, Chairman. Are there any public speakers, please?
No public speakers on this one, Chair.
Okay, if there's no public speakers, then nothing to add from the solicitor. We now open the committee for debate, please.
Okay, Richard Fortune's just indicated he'd like to add a comment, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, Richard, if you would, please.
Thanks, Richard Fortune, Planner. We actually have had a comment from the Parish Council come in very late last night, and just to update members, they say that long the Parish Council support the application, and then the condition, they said, provided that neither the existing garage due for demolition nor the proposed new garage is permitted to be used as a separate dwelling, and this is ensured by suitable conditions. So it reaffirms what Andrew said, but they have actually indicated support for the application.
Okay, thank you. Right, members of the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Turner's indicated he'd like to speak, please.
Councillor Turner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's fairly straightforward, this, and I don't detect any resistance, so I'd be happy to propose that the committee go along with the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Next speaker, please.
Councillor Harris, Chair.
Councillor Simon Harris, please.
Thank you. Strangely enough, I go past this place on a regular basis, so it's strange to see it on the photograph. It is out in the country. It is, and although you talk about overlooking neighbours, the neighbours are a long way from each other, aren't they? And you've seen from the photographs how you can't even see some of the properties through the trees. I have no problems with anything like this. This is a family home being extended for a family, so I am happy to second the proposal.
Thank you. Have we got any other speakers, please?
No other indications to speak, Chair.
Right, does the officer wish to make any comments, please?
No, thank you, Chair. No, nothing else to add, Chair.
Okay. If there's no other comments, I'd ask the solicitor now to put it to the vote, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Again, if I could just confirm that only those members present for the whole of the item can vote. We've got a proposal and a seconder to approve the officer recommendation to grant permission, subject to no further objections being received that raise new material planning considerations and subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1. So if you could please indicate whether you're voting for or against that proposal. Councillor Evans?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Boddington?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Hignett?
For.
Councillor Huffer?
For.
Councillor Motley?
For.
Councillor Parsons?
For.
Councillor Shinton?
For.
Councillor Tyndall?
For.
And Councillor Woodward?
For.
Okay, Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you very
For the
much.
proposal. Thank you.
So that proposal is carried according to the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much for that. Right, we now go into a list of appeals and appeal decisions. Richard, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Richard Fortune, Principal Planner. We got 6 just to let you be aware of. Firstly, we've had an appeal allowed for erection of a dwelling and a detached double garage at the Dingle Hopton Wafers. This was a modification to a previous approval. We had refused it on the grounds of the neighbouring relationship to the neighbouring property, particularly by the garage position, but the inspector disagreed with us on that point. We then got a proposal which was for a dwelling on land south of Snell Beach. We refused that one for 3 reasons. In terms of WASP, Snell Beach is a community cluster. This particular plot is not considered to be part of that cluster, being somewhat open countryside on the edge, and considering it will be distorted in the future, leading to a loss of woodland. That's an important characteristic of the area. We then got an appeal. This is going to be a hearing. It relates to a gypsy caravan site, English Lane or Brighton. This is a site where it's part retrospective in terms of the hard standing and septic tank having been installed, but there's no, to my knowledge, occupation of the site yet. This is one which is somewhat more detached from Old Brighton than the sites that we have previously looked at there. And in terms of the green belt issues, we do not consider there is a case for approval. That's got to be a hearing, but it has to await such time as to when COVID restrictions are lifted to enable it to be a face-to-face hearing rather than the virtual one. So that may be somewhat delayed. We then have an application that has been refused for a dwelling at Park Lane, Shifnal. This one's simply been on the basis that it is greenbelt and no very special circumstances to justify granting consent. Then we have another report of the appeal decision dismissed. This was a proposal in Highley for 5 dwellings on a site at Vicarage Lane. The inspector agreed with our conclusions that it will be overdevelopment of the site with unacceptable impacts on neighbour amenity and privacy. It's a site that there is a consent for 1 dwelling, but the applicant has been seeking to have rather more on that through a number of applications that have been turned down. And then finally, we got an appeal that's been lodged against this refusal of an application for a live work building conversion at Applecross Equestrian Elbley. The officer refusal reason is on the grounds that the nature of the building, which is a Dutch barn, is not one that makes any contribution to the character of the area, and the amount of works involved is tantamount to effective construction of a new dwelling in the officer view under the canopy of the existing Dutch barn. We also considered there was no actual clear functional need for it to be used in connection with the business operation. That's the decisions, and the appeals have been lodged. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Does the solicitor wish to make any comments, please, on that?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Do any members of the committee wish to make any comments on the appeals, please? No. Okay. Right. The date of the next meeting will be Tuesday, the 16th of February. And I'd like to thank all the members for taking part today. I'd like to thank the planning officers for all their hard work and expertise as usual. And I'd like to thank Kim for being a solicitor on this committee today. So thank you all very much. And as I say, a healthy new year for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.